The mountains did not care about Ethan Rourke, which was precisely why he liked them. He had been up here for 3 days with a geological survey kit, a tent that had survived 4 field seasons through sheer institutional stubbornness, and enough freeze-dried provisions to last a week if he was not too particular about variety, which he wasn't. The work was methodical and quiet, and required the kind of sustained attention that left no room for anything else, which was also why he liked it. The research body had given him a grid, a deadline, and a satellite uplink for emergencies. Everything else was rock and altitude, and the sound of wind doing what wind does when there is nothing to stop it. On the 3rd evening, the light dropped below the western ridge in the particular way it did up here. Not gradually, not apologetically, just gone, and the temperature fell after it with the efficiency of something that had done this every day for 10,000 years and saw no reason to ease into it. Ethan had the fire going and a pouch of something that described itself as a hearty stew open in his hand when he heard footsteps at the tree line. He looked up. She walked into the firelight with the unhurried calm of someone who had decided to do this and saw no reason to announce it dramatically. She was tall, with the kind of composure that didn't come from training so much as from having been a certain way for a long time. Her hair was dark, worn loose, and her ears. He registered this the way you register something that doesn't fit the existing model, with a brief internal delay before the information lands, were long and tapered, curving to fine points that caught the firelight in a way that was not a trick of it. She looked at the fire, then at him. "May I share your fire?" she asked. Her English was precise and slightly formal, the cadence of someone who had learned it thoroughly rather than colloquially. Ethan looked at her. He looked at the tree line behind her, which offered no further explanation. He looked back at her. "Sure," he said. She was already sitting down. He offered her the hearty stew. She accepted it with an expression of complete composure that he would later identify as the diplomatic face of someone committing to a gracious act. She ate a small, considered amount and said nothing about it, which he respected. "What brings you up here?" he asked. "The mountains," she said. He nodded. That was, technically, a complete answer. Her name was Vel. She offered this without additional context, and he received it the same way, because 3 days alone at altitude had recalibrated his sense of what information was necessary and what was simply habit. They talked about the geology first, because he had been thinking about it all day, and she asked a question specific enough that he answered it fully before remembering that most people asked about rocks as a courtesy rather than a genuine inquiry. She was not asking as a courtesy. She wanted to know about the sedimentary compression patterns in the eastern face, and when he explained them, she asked a follow-up that was better than his explanation deserved. "You know geology," he said. "I know pressure and time," she said. "The specifics vary by location." He looked at her for a moment. She was watching the fire with the specific quality of attention he associated with people who were actually looking at something rather than simply directing their eyes at it. The cold had deepened to the kind that settled in rather than assaulted, and Vel was unbothered by it in a way that was not performance. She simply did not appear to experience it as a problem. Ethan, who had on 2 additional layers since sundown, noted this without remarking on it. "You're not from near here," he said. "No," she said. "Far?" She considered this with a seriousness that seemed proportionate to the question in a way he couldn't quite account for. "Further than most," she said. He handed her the second pouch, something that described itself as a Mediterranean vegetable medley, and she accepted it with the same composed graciousness as the first. He had the feeling, which he couldn't locate precisely, that she was enjoying herself. Not in a performed way. In the way of someone who has been given something they didn't know they wanted until they had it. They talked about pressure and time, about the specific silence of high places, about whether mountains were more interesting from below or above. She had opinions that arrived at slight angles to where he expected them and were, consistently, more interesting than the expected version. At one point, she said something dry about the relationship between permanence and perspective, and he laughed before he'd processed it, which was the truest kind. The fire burned low around 10. She showed no inclination to leave, and he showed no inclination to ask. "You're unusual company for up here," he said eventually. "I imagine most of your company up here is geological," she said. "The rock formations are reliable but not great conversationalists. All the best listeners are," she said. The fire asked them nothing and they sat with it, until it asked them to let it go. And then they let it go. And she arranged 2 stones beside the ash ring with a quiet deliberateness he noticed but didn't ask about, and said goodnight in the formal, genuine way that made the word feel like it had weight, and was gone into the dark before he'd entirely registered she was leaving. He sat for a while looking at the 2 stones. Then he went asleep. She was gone when he woke. The camp was exactly as he'd left it except for the 2 stones by the dead fire and, outside the tent flap, a small object he had not placed there. It was roughly the size of his thumb, geometric in a way that suggested intention rather than accident, and a dark material that was neither metal nor plastic in any category his hands recognized. It was emitting something, not light, not sound, but a presence his survey equipment registered as a signal on a frequency. The equipment was not designed to detect and had no record of encountering before. He photographed it, documented it, and called his research colleague Dr. Amara Singh on the satellite uplink, because she knew considerably more about considerably more things than he did and had never once made him feel bad about calling. By midday, she had patched him, through a series of increasingly senior communications channels he had not known existed, into something described as an interspecies emergency liaison frequency. By midday and 15 minutes, he had learned that the object was a sovereign locator beacon registered to the ruling house of the Vihari, an Ethori-adjacent species with whom Earth had maintained quiet diplomatic relations for 11 years. By midday and 20 minutes, he had learned that the ruling house of the Vihari had been conducting a search for their queen for approximately 72 hours. He sat on the ground outside his tent in the mountain light and held the beacon and looked at the 2 stones she had arranged beside the dead fire. He thought about a woman who had asked about sedimentary compression patterns with genuine interest, who had eaten freeze-dried vegetable medley with diplomatic composure, who had been unbothered by the cold in a way that was not performance, who had said that all the best listeners were rocks and had been, in that moment, the most comfortable person he had sat beside in longer than he wanted to calculate. He thought about the word further and the specific, proportionate seriousness with which she had said it. He looked at the beacon. "Okay," he said, to no one in particular. She came back before the retrieval team arrived. He had thought she might. He was sitting by a rebuilt fire with the beacon on the ground between the 2 stones when she walked out of the tree line again. And this time the daylight showed him things the firelight had softened, the quality of her bearing, the precision of her stillness, the way she moved through space as someone who had always understood it to be hers. She sat across from him, the fire was between them. She looked at the beacon, then at him. "You found it quickly," she said. "It wasn't hidden," he said. "No," she said. "It wasn't." He waited. She looked at the fire with the same quality of attention she had given it the night before, and he understood that whatever she was about to say, she had already decided to say, that the honesty of the next few minutes was not improvised. "I wanted one evening," she said, "without the weight of what I am, a fire and someone who had no reason to look at me as anything other than a person at a fire." She paused. "It is more difficult than it sounds to arrange." "I imagine it is," he said. "I did not plan on the conversation being what it was," she said, which was as close as her register would come to admitting something had surprised her. "What were you expecting?" She considered this honestly. Something pleasant and forgettable, a fire with a stranger. She looked at him. "You are not especially easy to forget." He looked at the 2 stones. "What are those for?" A pause. "A Vihari custom," she said. "When you share fire with someone, you leave a stone for each person who was present, so the place remembers even after you've gone." He was quiet for a moment. Above the western ridge, the sky was beginning the long, unhurried business of turning. He could hear, distantly, the low atmospheric displacement of a craft settling somewhere beyond the ridge line. "Is there a custom for not going?" he asked.